This is your Lake of the Ozarks fishing report for December 27th, 2016. This report is courtesy of Joe's Lake Ozark Guide Service, and this report mainly encompasses the upper Osage, upper lake area. Today, around the 50 to 55 mile marker. All right, lake conditions. The lake is at 657, which is 3 feet below summer pool. After January 1 here this next weekend, they're going to start drawing the lake down to get it down to about 5, maybe. Hopefully it doesn't get down to 6 feet below summer pool, but that's what they always say their goal is, barring any rain or snow or so forth. So we'll just have to wait and see. The water is pretty clear here in the upper Osage. It gets a little dirtier to get out on the main lake, but you get back in the creeks or the mouths of the creeks, you can see down a foot, foot and a half, which for the upper Osage area, that's pretty some of the clearest water we usually see for the whole year. So the water's pretty clear right now. Water temperature, extremely cold, 37 degrees is what the water temperature is right now. That last heavy cold front we had come through, where we had temperatures down into single digits and even at 0, that really put a zap on the fish and the water temperature, so it really dropped that water down. And one of the things you want to understand about the upper lake area is that things in the upper lake area are going to happen before things happen in the lower lake area. So like right now, the water temperature is 37 degrees here. You could go down around Osage Beach or the mouth of the Gravois, and that water down there is going to be in the high 40s, so there can be that big of a difference. Now, come springtime, that trend will reverse. This water up here is going to warm up a lot faster than the water down the lake will be. So March can be an extremely fantastic month for bass fishing in the upper lake area, because a lot of these shallow flats and creeks and creek channel banks are going to warm up before those same banks will warm up down in the lower end. So that kind of gives you an idea of the difference between the upper end and the lower end. All right, bass fishing today was extremely slow. I mean, we had a few bites, very few fish, and most fish were small. And when you get up into the winter time, your choice of lures is a lot fewer, and when the water gets below 42 or 40, it gets pretty difficult to catch some of these fish if you don't have really clear water. That's the key, because these fish, when the water gets that cold, they're just not going to chase things. That's the bottom line. They're not going to chase, so it eliminates a lot of lures in the tackle box. So in the upper lake area, I mean, basically you're looking at bottom bouncing baits, maybe a jerk bait if you get into some clear water, or you have an area where you've caught fish before and you know those fish sit there through the winter. You can throw a jerk bait. This is just this is a Mega Bass jerk bait. This is a Pro Blue color. I'll use sometimes a color that either has a white bottom on the bottom or have a tint of chartreuse. This has some white with a little bit of chartreuse mixed in, or I'll use a bait that has a chartreuse bottom, because when bass hit these jerk baits, they're actually looking up at them. The jerk baits are much better in the clear water down the lake. I'll just give you that right now. Up in the upper lake area, guys and people who fish the upper lake area are going to fish jigs more than anything else. And that's what I have here. I've had a crocodigator jig. This is a smaller jig. This is a 3/8 ounce. And what I do with this jig is, instead of going out and buying finesse jigs to fish in the winter, I can take a 3/8 ounce jig or even a 1/4 ounce jig and cut the skirt so it'll have a finesse jig type action. What I mean by it is, all these jigs, and Jim and Denise Dill put these jigs together, and they do a fantastic job. And there's a video on Bassing Bob of Jim showing you how to take this jig and trim it so it looks like a spider jig. So just get on bassingbob.com, go to the video tab, the video page, and you'll see Jim talking about how to spider these jigs. But basically what you do is you take this rubber band in the middle. This jig is one long skirt, and you lay it out and you separate it. You have one set of strands that point out this way, and another strand are going to point that way. And basically you just turn it upside down so these strands are hanging down. You just take your scissors and clip it, and then when you clip it, the strands that are clipped will stick out to the side and make this a spider jig. And what happens, the advantage of the spider jig is that when you bring it over a rock or a log or something and you let it fall, water's going to catch these parts of the skirt that are sticking out, and it creates a little resistance, and this jig will actually fall a lot slower. That's the idea behind the spider jigs. That's why that's done. And then of course you want to shorten up your jig trailer. when we get into the spring and stuff, I won't shorten the jig trailer. I'll leave normal length, so this jig trailer might stick out about that far. But right now, I just kind of want the pinchers to stick out just below the bottom of the skirt. That's kind of where I want it to be. So the bait's a smaller, more compact bait, because in the wintertime, these fish don't want a big, huge meal. They want to eat small things, and they don't eat as much. So that's why winter fishing, when the water temperature gets below 40 degrees, is extremely, extremely difficult in the upper lake area, because you're limited to what you can throw. Now, a better lure, in my opinion, to throw is the swamp bug. It's fished on a football head, shaky head, and it's just a little creature bait's what it is. It has tentacles sticking out on the side with a shad-like tail, and basically you fish this just like you would fish a jig. But here's the key: when the wintertime, when the water's is colder, you're fishing the swamp bug or the jig, is that you don't really want to hop the bait. You want to drag it on the bottom, because if that fish is sitting there and you're hopping that bait, you actually technically can, if you're hopping that bait, hop it right over that fish. That fish's metabolism is so slow in the super cold water that fish usually is not going to jump up there and grab that bait. So you can just drag that bait and almost run that bait right into the mouth of the fish. That's what you almost have to do at times when the water gets this cold, because they're not going to feed that much, and it's a lot more difficult in super cold water like now to trigger those fish into biting. So when you're fishing that jig down that creek channel bank, and most creek channel banks are going to have a lip of some kind where it's going to drop, and you're going to have a foot or two difference in depth where that bank comes out, and then it'll just kind of drop. Those fish will usually sit right there on that drop. And what you want to do when you get that bait to where that drop is, you don't want to hop it off that drop. You just want to barely pull it and drag it off that drop. And the best way I can tell you to work that when you're working your rod tip is, when you work the rod tips with this swamp bug, don't try to pull the bait with the rod tip. Just try to pull the slack out of the line, and then reel out, and then pull the slack out of the line, so that you're keeping that bait on the bottom, but you're just kind of pulling the slack out of the line, and that'll move the bait, inch it along. It's extremely slow fishing. You cannot fish as many creeks in a day as you normally would if you were fishing in October or April, So you're going to have to fish a creek that you've had caught fishing before, or you have confidence in, and then fish it very slowly, very thoroughly, and that's what you'll have to do. Now, like I said, you can also use a jerk bait, but it's more applied to the lower end of the lake. It will work up here, but it's a lot better application if you'll use it on the lower end of the lake where you have the 3 foot of visibility. And then, of course, the Alabama rig is another good wintertime bait on Lake the Ozarks. But again, it's better suited for fishing down the lake and in clear water. It has 5 wire arms with a bait on the bottom. And in Missouri, you can only have 3 exposed hooks. So my other 2 baits are teasers. These are just baits. These are just grubs. What these are curly-tailed grubs I put on here. And so when that bait comes by a bass, they'll think it's a school of bait fish and it's an easy meal, and they'll jump out there and grab it. Of course, it's more of a sight feeding application, so it's more of a better bait to use down in the clear water than it is up here in the dark, dirty water. So that's kind of your fishing report for the upper lake area. As far as bass fishing goes, there's not much going on. If we get some warming trends and the water temperature comes up, then those fish will get more active. But basically, if I'm going out and bass fishing right now, I'm fishing the creek channel banks, and I'm fishing secondary and main lake points, and I'm fishing the jig. If I look at my graph and I see the bait fish are stuck to the bottom, and today they were, I'm fishing it extremely, extremely slow. And I'm doing that on the points, and also, and people ask, well, what's a creek channel side? What's that? Well, if you go on any creek, every creek has one side that's a little bit steeper and one side that's a little flatter. That side that's steeper is the side that has a creek channel bank. That's basically how we do that. I usually only fish the major creeks in the upper lake area during this time of year. Bollinger, Cartwright, Pearson Bay, Proctor Creek, Rainy Creek, creeks like that. Those are the ones I fish because they have really good defined creek channel banks in them. You go into some of these smaller coves and creeks, you can probably get bit in there, but I just don't really spend a lot of time in there, because in the wintertime, because you have to fish so slow, you don't have a lot of time. The days are shorter, and it takes you longer to fish a creek channel bank. So good luck in your fishing through the winter. Happy New Year's coming up. It's January. I was watching the weather this morning. Seems like after the first, we've got another really super cold Arctic front coming in, so that's probably going to further zap the water temperature. The lake right now is not iced over in the upper end. I think the back ends probably were about a week or two ago when we had that severe cold front come through. With the water temperature at 37 degrees, it's not going to take much for it to refreeze. So you may not get another fishing report from me till mid to late February. I have other obligations in the winter, but if I do have a chance to get back out on the water, I'll do another report. But March is when things will really heat up in the upper lake area. So if you're interested in a guide trip, give me a call if you want to set something up for in March or even April. And I'll gladly accommodate and take you out and show you what's going on, show you the creek channel bank, show you where the spawning pockets are, where these fish spawn, where they pull back out to after they spawn, and the whole deal. So Happy New Year to you and your family, and thank you for watching.